Hello again, it's me, the great floating head, who teaches you things about philosophy from distant lands such as Lancaster, Pennsylvania. If you're wondering why I'm doing it this way, it's because I'm noticing that the little green bar on the side of the thing is not getting very high, and when I look back over them, things are kind of muffled, and I want to make sure that you can hear me okay and not get bored quickly. In the process, you're going to have to look at my ugly mug from a very, very unflattering angle, which I'm okay with for now. Okay, so where were we? Wittgenstein question. The idea that meaning is use. Okay, so you might say, what does this have to do with knowledge? Whoa. What does this have to do with knowledge if this is a question about linguistic meaning? But it does have a lot to do with knowledge in the sense that when I use a word, all I'm referring to is some convention about how a word is used, then in that case, then I can't really say that I know the thing. Okay, all I know is how that this word is used in some sort of conventional standpoint. So, for example, this deals a lot with the question of, kind of, not that it's a stoner question, but you can imagine, hey man, how do I know your red's the same as my red? Blah blah blah. Well, Wittgenstein's answer would be if you pointed to a blue cooler and everybody else used the convention red to describe it, it doesn't matter what you see. It has everything to do with how everyone around you perceives things. So in that case, the actual object is not what's being discussed. It's our linguistic conventions for discussing it. So that's sort of an interesting way of dealing with that problem. Okay, so now that we're done with the question sets, I'd like to not make you think that we're on one of those creepy, stupid ghost hunter shows, because I'm connected to you in this weird way. I want to introduce the topics for this week. We have two very prominent topics. I'll be sending you information at least on one, but I want to go over it real quick. So many of you are science majors, which just makes me so happy. You might ask why. The reason is because I love talking science. I love talking knowledge and truth with science people. First of all, I respect what they do, and I do believe that they have a lot to tell us about what knowledge is. Second, because I like to disabuse them of the notion that science is the only way of knowing the world. If you're interested in more of this disabusal, if that's a word, come to my class in the fall, which is the history and philosophy of science, where we'll discuss some of these bigger issues. The question is important because science is the main way that we think we understand the world. Many of you said this in your introduction, something like, well, in philosophy it's all opinion, and in science there's one hard and fast answer. I think that was one answer given. My question is, and this week we'll ask this question, is that true? Is it the case that there is really only one possible answer in science, or even math for that matter? So that's one of the questions we're going to ask. We're going to ask questions about what is the scientific method, okay? When you're in high school, you're taught this very simplistic view. You have a problem, you come up with a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis, and then bing, you have an answer, and everybody's happy at the end. But this is not how science has ever been traditionally done. People do not just come up with a hypothesis out of the thin air. How do they come up with hypotheses? How do you know that your hypothesis is one that you should even test in the first place? What sort of questions go in to deciding that? One thing that I study is a notion called abduction. No, I'm not a creepy kidnapper. The idea of abduction is how we understand what is hypothetically possible. So, for example, my trash cans are missing. I go outside to look for my trash cans, and I look around and they're gone. A couple days later, I see some kids rolling around in a trash can that looks like mine. How do I decide what is a valid hypothesis? Because from a certain perspective, any hypothesis is valid here. I could say, well, the aliens must have taken my trash cans, or raccoons must have gotten together and rolled it down the street to serve as their underground lair. Or I could say that God stole my trash can because of my sinful ways. There's a million possible answers to this question. How do we narrow in on what is a valid hypothesis and what is, quite frankly, nonsense? So that's one question. Another question is, how does testing work? Is it that we just go out and we observe and then uncontroversially decide based on what we observe how the world is? When we do experiments, how do we know that experiments do test the thing that we're looking for? The history of science is actually filled with discoveries made by looking at other people's experiments and saying, you have not proven anything like what you think that you've proven. Okay? I happen to think that this branch called the evolutionary psychology is fraught with this kind of stuff. For example, they'll say something like, men have goatees in order to highlight their masculine jaws to attract women. When we experiment on this, we notice that men with goatees get more women, therefore it must have an evolutionary function. Well, there's a whole host of problems there that we have to discuss. Other questions are, what does it mean to be a woman in science? You know, this is a very important question. So, I think that this should be central to what philosophers do, because science, again, is the only game in town. Science is the main way we know things, and yet we do so uncritically. We expect science to tell us whatever we want about the world without asking any questions about its methods, its experimentation, and its modes of conclusion. I'm writing a paper right now about how Wikipedia is, on average, better than most scientific textbooks at giving up-to-date scientific information, and yet people don't trust it because it doesn't have a guy in the lab coat telling you the information. So, just like the how do I know question, I really want to ask certain fundamental questions about the way that science works. So the question for the forum this week is going to be something like, how do we know our hypotheses are correct? How do we know what hypotheses to try? I'm going to post it in much more eloquent fashion. Remember, there's now sickness creeping into my brain, I'm pretty sure. Nevertheless, I'll be right back with our final introduction for the week. I hope these videos help. I'm not doing them just for myself, obviously. Please feel free to critique if I'm talking too fast, which I am, if I'm talking too softly, if you're worried that I'm in some sort of barn. Please call for help. No. Anyway, I'll be right back with Hume. Thanks.